Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the morning so far. Welcome back as well to the people online. So we are now back to a hybrid version. We are live streaming and recording. So we're really glad that we're going to have a legacy of the fantastic talks that we're about to hear. So we've got 2 more panels this afternoon with presentations from our makers and artists. And then we're going to have a roundtable at the end of the day. And as a reminder, the roundtable will not be live streamed and recorded. So that's just in person. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Hannah Britton, who's our Learning and Outreach Officer at Kelmscott Manor, to start us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is a real pleasure to introduce the next panel in our proceedings today, because it consists of the current and the 2 former makers in residence at Kelmscott Manor. And as the Learning and Outreach Officer there, I have the great privilege and pleasure of working with these 3 incredible makers and running the residency program alongside our curator, Dr. Kathy Haslam. This has been a 3-year program that we've run at the Manor as part of a major NLHF-funded project, Kelmscott Manor Past, Present and Future, which has involved conservation and redevelopment at the Manor and a wonderful activity program. And the residency really sits within our aims to have a living legacy of craft, making and creativity in response to Morris and the specificity of our site. So it's been really, really exciting to see how each of the makers has responded to the landscape, the environment, and to Morris's ethos and ideas in the work that they have created. We decided that it was important that we had a maker in residence rather than what we might traditionally think of as an artist residency, because Morris was a maker, and it felt that this would be true to our heritage at the Manor. And so we decided to partner with Heritage Crafts on this residency program, and that we would be celebrating and supporting heritage makers and showcasing their work and introducing the work of heritage craftspeople to a much wider audience through our visitors. Each of the makers has done their own personal work and professional development, responding to the site through creating assets for the Manor, but also a massive amount of public engagement, which has been really, really exciting for us to see how visitors have been introduced to new ideas and have responded to the materials and the creative processes of our makers. And I won't say anything about them because they will speak for themselves. But we've been really able to see the successes of a project like this, where we can bring making back into the Manor spaces so that the museum is a living space and a space where craft continues into the future and is not just something that we look back to with Morris and all that he did in terms of championing heritage crafts and producing so much. I'm not going to say anything else because I want our lovely makers to speak for themselves. So I'm going to hand over to Biz Fretty, who is the philanthropy and membership lead for Heritage Crafts, who is going to chair our panel for us.
Good question. Can everyone, is this good? Sounds nice? Yes? Up, more up. Does that sound better? Sounds good to me. Okay, yes, okay. We're rocking. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce these 3 lovely panelists, and we're going to start in order. So first off, we have Alison Proctor. After a career in dance and the arts, Alison did a studio ceramics course at the Royal Forest of Dean College. In 2021, she was awarded the Developing Your Own Creative Practice grant from Arts Council England to support building a full-time studio practice. In 2023, she was then the inaugural maker in the residence at Kelmscott Manor in Oxfordshire in partnership with Heritage Crafts. Alison is a member of the London Potters, Kent Potters, an association member of the Craft Potters Association, and a member of Heritage Crafts. She is a ceramicist who creates wheel-thrown and hand-built pieces that reflect her passion for nature, from the broad horizons of the Romney marshes and coasts where she lives to the flora found in her local hedgerows and fields. Her work includes a range of functional, decorative, and sculptural pieces made from earthenware clay. She has recently made more into her exploring of the traditional of creating sprig molds directly cast from plants. So please welcome Alison first.
Okay, hope that's loud. Is that loud enough for you? I'll try not to shout. Okay. I feel like I'm slightly still in the realm of dance with improvisation, but I will try to make sense as I carry on talking. So I was the first maker in residence at Kelmscott, and I'm going to talk about the residency and how that affected the work that I make now, and also how that inspired everything that I was making while I was there. I'm quite intrigued by the notion of residencies and what that means, and what the value is to the maker and also to the place that they're in. And I was originally drawn to Kelmscott because it was Kelmscott. I had learned about William Morris back when he was deeply unfashionable, and as part of the pre-Raphaelite movement and arts and crafts movement at college. And when I was learning, as I said, he wasn't particularly fashionable, but I learned about his designs. And it was only later that I learned more about his socialism and his activism and his environmentalism. And at Kelmscott, it felt like all of those things came together. So I was really drawn to what, if he was still alive today, how would he be using Kelmscott? And I imagine he would be out there with placards and banners in Trafalgar Square, like Extinction Rebellion, I imagine. I don't know. So when I went to Kelmscott, I was drawn more to what was going on outside in the garden and in the meadows than I was particularly to the house, because I felt I knew the house. I'd been there before. I knew about his designs and the objects, but I wanted to get under the skin a little bit, and I wanted to kind of look at what had inspired him and walk in his footsteps. And as it turns out, walk in May Morris's footsteps. She became more important to me, I think, over the time of the residency than Morris himself. For no particular reason other than I discovered we were kind of following the same train of thought. So at Kelmscott, Hannah, please correct me if I get anything wrong, had a big renovation project, and part of the funding for the residency came from that pot of money. And with it came the design of this beautiful barn, and I'm only showing a little bit of it here, but that became my studio. So as you can see, I was literally surrounded in the nature, and it was a wonderful place to work. And when I got there, I was lucky that it was full meadow. The meadow flowers were going crazy. And I remember running around with Hannah, just trying to capture every single moment because it just was so fleeting and went so quickly. So my first days there were really about capturing what was there, photographing it, pressing it, making molds. And it was only afterwards that I thought, maybe I should look what's in the house. So I then started to look for things that were part of the meadow within the pieces that were in the house. So I became quite obsessed with daisies, and daisies are everywhere if you look in the house, even in places that you might not necessarily get to see as a visitor. So I was lucky to have the wonderful bed curtain opened for me to reveal the daisies below. And I think these are, the middle picture are some of the daisies that are not necessarily visible to other visitors. It's in the wallpaper, it's in the hangings, it's in the books, the herbals. Everywhere you look, when you look, you'll find the daisies. Even in the middle picture there, the rubbing that Morris did at the barn that I can't remember the name of, the church are grey. So you can see, and they either appear in groups of 3s or 5s, and that was also quite interesting. But at this stage, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So I was kind of still looking. Then when I was there, I had no intention whatsoever of working with acanthus because that felt like it was too obvious. It was too synonymous with Morris. But I got drawn to it inevitably because it's growing in the garden. But there was great excitement when I was there because the first tiny shoots had begun to come up from the ground. And they thought they had lost the entire plant because of the renovation works that had been going on. So I grabbed a few of the new shoots and I started to make a pressing from it. And I realized actually what I'm drawn to when I look for plants is what the texture is. Can I get a really good impression? Acanthus gives you an amazing impression. So I started to make molds of the acanthus. And then as Hannah and I were doing our many preambles around the meadow, we came across this other plant, which I'd never heard of, called bryony. And it's a vine, and it was actually growing around their compost heap at the time. But it was a beautiful plant. It's actually quite poisonous, but it was a beautiful plant. So I then got drawn to that, and I thought, well, there's the acanthus is the formal, and the bryony is the wild. And slowly ideas began to form as to how I could bring something together. I think you're all aware of the acanthus design that Morris uses. Actually, when you look at it and you look at the original acanthus plant, you realize quite how stylized it is in the designs. There's only one thing in the manor that has an acanthus leaf on it, I think I'm right in saying, which is one of his original tapestries in the hallway. And I think he taught himself to make this, didn't he? So he was learning as well. And then I'm jumping ahead a little bit here just because completely by chance and slightly, I think towards the end of the residency, I discovered that I'd actually been walking literally in May Morris's footsteps because I was looking through this fabulous book of her work and I was actually looking for daisies in her work. And I came across this embroidery called The Fruit Garden. And initially I saw the acanthus, you can see, winding up through the plant. And then I looked a bit closer, and if you look carefully, you can see there is the bryony winding its way around the acanthus. And I just thought, how amazing that I had actually, without realizing, completely followed in what May Morris was also interested in. And I think that's testament to Kelmscott because there's so much there. And why wouldn't I be inspired by the same things? So that was quite special to me. This was actually an embroidery kit. And I've written down, it was made in 1888. And the one that this is the picture of was actually made by someone called Theodosa Middlemore. And it's in the V&A collection, and I hope to see it one day if I can. So going ahead, the process of casting. So the piece that you can see on the table there is the piece that I made for the Manor's collection. And again, that really evolved as the residency went along. But it began with pressing a leaf into the clay, and then taking a plaster mold of that, and then taking a silicone mold of that. And with that silicone mold, I could then make lots of acanthus leaves. The other thing that I really wanted to do when I was there was to make something that was a collective, something that was made with the hands of many. And we were allowed to use the attic, which was very, very nice. And so through the workshops that Hannah was talking about, visitors were able, with the molds, to make a whole series. And I think there was over 200 in the end made within the installation. So the installation as it was in the attic was actually made by the hands of many people, from very little people to older people. And I was able to bring the briny in with it. And then I wanted to make, for the collection, I wanted to make something that was formal and informal. And I wanted to make something that reflected Morris's love of bringing the outside in. So I threw the base of this pot on the wheel, and then with the casts of the acanthus, I then created something that was quite living with movement in it. And then I discovered this wire, it's called nichrome wire, which you can fire in the kiln. And that changed everything for me, because then I could put wire into the piece and I could attach it. So I was able to give the briny a more lifelike flow up through the acanthus of the piece. And that felt for me a really lovely way of bringing everything together. The acanthus is interesting because it's such a formal thing within his design, but I felt that it was a really lovely leaf to work with. And I think those of you that had a go at making them out in the foyer there, you just get drawn into the detail of it and the texture of it. And I also wanted to make things, so with the installation, I wanted to make things that you could touch, because quite often within places like this, you can't touch anything. You can't feel what it feels like. You don't get the sense of that. So with the installation, it was absolutely, you could touch it. So how has it influenced me as I've gone on? Well, I was already making floral pieces, but I wasn't as brave as this piece made me. I wasn't as adventurous with what I was doing. So I was already doing sprig work, but I hadn't looked at where I could go with it in a more sculptural way. I was using it quite traditionally with earthenware. So these two pieces are using the wild strawberries that grow in the Kelmscott Manor that are famously attached with his Strawberry Thief piece. And then I've begun to make little acanthus vases. And then actually it was after the presentation we did here just over a year ago, someone approached me to make them a briar out of bryony, a bryony bower, that's a tongue twist. So I've been doing that as well, but now I'm making more sculptural things. I've discovered what the wire can do. And with the pieces, trying to make almost three-dimensional paintings in a way. And these are my latest pieces with nasturtium, and then with wild grasses. And then finally, this is a strawberry, again, using the same molds that I did at Kelmscott, a strawberry piece, and then a bramble piece. So it's still, I think the other resident artists will also agree that it's still in my head, actually, about being in Kelmscott, and I'm really excited to see how that gets drawn out. And I think the one thing to say to any curators in the room in terms of the value of having a maker or an artist in residence at your place is that you can make physical what you're trying to do almost in the two-dimension. And certainly the feedback that I had from visitors was that they would come from my workshop and then go into the manor having put their hands around an acanthus leaf or put their hands around something, making, and then go into the manor with new eyes and look at the artifacts and all the things that are in there that he had made, having walked through the willows and made the willow wallpaper, or for May Morris to have brought things in from the garden. They could view them with a different perspective and felt more engaged with what they were looking at instead of walking past and barely noticing some of it. So I think I would thoroughly recommend residencies. I think, though, as a maker, I would say you have to feel really passionate about why you're being there and what you want to get out of it. But I think for me, it was a hugely inspirational time. So thank you.
Nope. Don't touch it. Is that correct? 1 second. All right, while we're waiting for tech to transition, I'll give you a little info about Sarah Davis, who's next. Sarah is a multimedia artist exploring themes relating to cyclical nature of recovery and renewal. Sarah uses traditional making techniques with a deep historical resonance, such as wood carving, miniature painting, and illumination. Sarah has been practicing the endangered art of illumination since 2020 and now teaches widely on the subject. Illumination is the art of applying gold to paper or vellum, with the resulting work traditionally bound with manuscripts. Most recently, Sarah has taught classes in illumination for Cambridge University Library, David Parr House, and Imperial College London. Graduating from Chelsea College of Art in 2012 with a BA in Fine Art, she returned to education in 2015 to study wood carving and gilding at the City and Guilds of London Art School, where she now teaches on the wood carving BA and conservation BA retrospectively. She was the second maker in resident at Kelmscott Manor in 2024 and spent her time focusing on the art of illumination. Ooh, we good? Yes.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, this is entirely my fault. I didn't manage to get Sarah's slides. So if you can give us 2 minutes and we will set up Sarah's slides. And thank you for your patience. Is that all right? We have 2 minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, my fault because I sent them very late last night. So yeah, thank you for that introduction. And as mentioned, I was the second maker in residence at Kelmscott Manor. And I will be echoing all the wonderful things that Alison said, that it really was a really brilliant experience for me as a maker and also an illuminator. And as Biz said, I started illuminating in 2020, which is a relatively recent amount of time. So it was amazing to go to the manor and be able to really be immersed in such an inspiring landscape, and also the wonderful interiors and the ongoing kind of wonders of the legacy of William Morris, who was so experimental in the way that he worked with materials and also thinking around craft. So William Morris taught himself book arts. He could illuminate. He taught himself calligraphic script. And there's also an exhibition on at Kelmscott Manor at the moment called, Hannah, correct me if I'm wrong, William Morris, a Literary Man. And is that it? Okay, A Literary Man, William Morris and the book. That's much better. So you can see a lot of his own text, but also pieces that have been inspired by William Morris. One of the pieces that I made whilst on the residency is included there. Yeah, sure. Okay. So a little bit more about my practice. So I'm a multimedia artist. I kind of see myself as a bit of a magpie for historic making techniques. So wood carving is one of the main endeavors that I go through, but also illumination and the route that I got into illumination. So to give a bit of context, illumination is an endangered craft. So only a handful of people practice it. Not quite like the wonderful fans, which are critically endangered, aren't they? But illumination is still endangered as a craft. So being able to pass on that legacy to other people is quite amazing. So there were a lot of workshops during the residency. We're nearly there. Yeah. Oh, it's not on there.
Oh, nothing. Okay, we're on it.
Nearly. So yeah, trying to also learn how to illuminate when there isn't a huge amount of information in how these wonderful manuscripts were made. So growing up, just looking at the beauty of like medieval manuscripts and the shining gold on the page, and trying to capture just even a bit of an energy of that style and the beauty of the medium. So it was a lot of looking through books. YouTube was also a wonderful means to try and understand this wonderful craft. Are we nearly there? No? Okay. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So, no, it's fine. I can keep going. So I started illuminating in 2020, as mentioned. So if we must cast our minds back, that's when the coronavirus pandemic was sort of putting us into lockdown. And at that time, I was just 2 years out of a stem cell transplant. And I mentioned that because the nature of healing and what it is to heal is a big part of my ongoing practice. So being kind of confined and having to stay indoors, there was a real sort of sense of reclamation in being able to use a craft that you could do on such a miniature scale. There's something that's incredibly accessible about the miniature and the illuminated miniature, and being able to create something beautiful that I can have a sense of control over in just this small sort of domestic space. So I sort of see craft and making as this amazing tool to give you a sense of agency when there's been so much lost, whether it is through illness. There was a kind of collective loss with the pandemic. So there really is something amazing about being able to rethink how you do something. I couldn't get to my studio. I couldn't work in the way that I usually could. So being able to do something on such a small scale was wonderful. And then coming to Kelmscott, being able to think like, what does illumination actually mean to me as an artist? Because my sort of process of understanding my body post stem cell transplant kind of resonated with like understanding what it was to work in this new way. So being able to be so inspired by the environment and the legacy of Morris as well was really quite something. It really was a wonderful way for me to understand how this craft really resonated on a personal level, as well as something wonderful that's so important for us to appreciate and understand. And the teaching of that is also a big part of it. So I sadly can't join the panel discussion later, the round table, because I'm teaching an evening class in illumination. And I always say at the start of the workshops that I do, it's like, you're all here to like help this craft remain viable. Because I think with the medieval manuscript, when you look at these beautiful images, I mean, the question I was asking myself when I saw these was like, how did they make those? How did they make it look like there was gold on the page that was like liquid? So being able to say to a group of people, you're here to kind of continue this legacy, to make sure these skills aren't lost. Yay! So here we are at the Manor. Are we good? Okay. It's not quite changing, but could we, if we get it on like the legacy piece that I made for, I can, as long as there's one image. Yeah, so this is the installation, oh, that's not the right picture. This is making gesso. This one, yeah, that one. Any of these is good. Okay, so I'll talk about this.
Okay, and now moves with
Yeah,
Darren.
okay, awesome. So, that's fine. Right, okay, what? Oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry, I've ruined it. I'm so sorry. Is it just, oh, okay, maybe because I used the mouse. Sorry. So the piece you just saw, the glimmer of the snake. That piece was inspired by just the wonders of the environment. Okay, it's back. And I go through the arrow, is that right? Okay. It's fine, it's fine. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. We're all good. So, gesso making. I spoke a little bit about this if you saw me earlier in the demos. So that is a really wonderful ancient process of how you create the raised images in manuscripts. So if you've ever been to an exhibition or had the joy of seeing them in the flesh, you'll see that the gesso is like raised from the page. The gold looks like liquid gold on the page. And underneath is this wonderful material, illumination gesso, that's made from slate plaster of Paris, lead white, secatine, and sugar. So you lay that one day, let it dry, then you breathe on it in order to wake it up just enough so the gold can stick. And there's so many reasons that needs to happen. It's because a lot of manuscripts are very susceptible to humidity, especially if they're bound with vellum. And like paper and vellum like that, you can't really get them that wet. So the medium has to be quite thick, and then the moisture you apply in order to get the gold to stick needs to be just the lightness of your breath. And if you think about how these were sort of sacred objects, there's a real kind of beauty in that you're breathing life into the image, and there's a very meditative quality. So I'll talk a little bit about the piece that I made whilst on residency and the inspiration behind the work. So this piece is called Taste the Air, and it references the way that the snake engages with the environment in such a sensory way, and it's sort of tasting as it moves through. The installation as a whole was called Gold in the Undergrowth, because there is so much to see that goes very much unseen. So I had this wonderful moment where someone called Raymond, who works at Kelmscott Manor, took me to see where the resident grass snakes were hiding. And of course, unless you know where they are and you have the sensitivity to approach them like Raymond did, no one would know that they're there. They're quietly hibernating or laying their eggs or doing something with the environment. We don't really know that they're there. So being able to have that brief moment of capturing an interaction with them was incredibly meaningful. And the way I thought about the surround was very much inspired by the May Morris, the embroidery that has the radcot cut as a circular kind of framing device, and then all these creatures that inhabited Kelmscott, but also fantastical creatures. So I sort of thought about it as everything that framed Kelmscott, and the center being this green gold illuminated core that kind of symbolized the sort of beauty and the golden qualities that inhabit Kelmscott, but very quiet at the same time. So this is very much on a miniature scale. So the way you engaged with it was through the magnifying glass that I also created. That's my mum engaging with the work. And engagement was a really important part of this piece as well. So in order to view the image, you had to pull a small tab in order to reveal it. I wanted it to kind of speak the language of the manuscript. So a lot of illuminations now are not bound within manuscripts. They sort of exist as either artworks in themselves or for documents or monikers or alongside calligraphy. So I wanted to kind of bring it back to the tactility of the manuscript in the way that you open a book and that reveals the image. The viewer had to pull the tab and then use the magnifying glass to see the wonders of what was inside, a little bit like the seeing of the creatures that quietly inhabit Kelmscott Manor. And yeah, the workshops was a huge part of being at Kelmscott, and it was really wonderful to be able to share the art of illumination with so many people, and also the community manuscript that we made as part of that time, and hopefully some of you saw it earlier at the back of the room. So people came over the course of a day to create an image, whether that was a gilded tree or an illuminated letter or a beast. And then a wonderful volunteer called Deborah Oliver did the calligraphy. So in the true spirit of how manuscripts were made, I'm an illuminator, not a calligrapher, so I can't do the calligraphy. But Deborah, who has a brilliant penmanship, did the wonderful Uncial script that you see there. And that's so much in the sort of spirit of Morris and collaboration and that collective group that can create a beautiful object. And it was also wonderful to work with the image in the top left, if that one, is that on the left, your left, my left, I don't know. That was a group called Shine Cancer Support, so it was great to work with a community that had such a personal resonance to me as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that I've made since being at Kelmscott. So during the beginning of ad-libbing at the start of this talk, how like the sense of health and recovery, the complex nature of recovery, what does it actually look like to recover, is a big part of my artistic thinking. So From the Ashes is also my first encounter with making my own paints, which is a big part of illumination. The pigment making, which is actually also an endangered craft. So it's kind of this two intersecting crafts that are also sort of equally at risk of being lost. So I took part in a pigment making course over the summer, which I will hopefully bring into my teaching over the next few months. And it really allows the work to kind of like be imbued with something else, that the pigment in the background was made by sort of found bones that were then turned into paint in the nature of burning, and the imagery within that kind of echoing the sense of, as things that sort of die, they renew and are reborn in some sort of cyclical sense. And similar with this piece, which was very much inspired by my visits to Cambridge University Library, where I've been doing some workshops recently. They have an exhibition called Curious Cures, which is full of medicinal manuscripts. And within that, they have some amazing images of the bisected body, and these very sort of like stylized depictions of our internal workings when created at a time when dissection wasn't legal, but then ideas around the body and relating them to sort of the spiritual was all part of like European medical thinking. So this work is inspired by the bisected body and in praise of dying cells, referring to that we need that kind of cyclical process to happen within our bodies in order for us to keep to stay alive. I forgot to talk about wood carving as well, if we have time. I also am a wood carver. So creating this frame was a really important part of my thinking with the residency as well, and being able to connect the various skills and techniques that I like to use as an artist and maker. So a lot of the woodwork was inspired by the pieces within Kelmscott Manor. That was an important thought process for me to connect a lot of the sort of thinking around bringing the outside in. And you might be able to, no, maybe not in that image, but that wonderful chest in the background. I wanted the carving of the frame to echo the piece that was already in the attic, so that the work could have a quietness as it sat in the attic. And again, as people revealed what was within, they were able to have a different experience with what they were looking at. So it was an absolutely amazing time to be at Kelmscott, and I can't believe how fast it went and how it has been over a year since I was, or about a year since I was last there. But yeah, just to echo what Alison said, like how transformative residencies can be and just taking you into a different way of thinking. So it's wonderful to share everything with you all today, and I'm very excited to hear about all the things that Sarah has done at Kelmscott. So thank you.
While we switch over, last but not least, another Sarah, very exciting. Sarah LeBreton, incredibly passionate about willow basketry, and I will say also William Morris himself. Also traditional craftsmanship, professional basket maker, designer, and teacher, Sarah LeBreton handcrafts woven pieces that marry heritage baskets, forms, techniques, and skills with innovative ideas. In her Devon workshop, Sarah designs, develops, and hand weaves baskets and lighting features that showcase traditional English techniques, as well as undertaking traditional basketry and willow and rush chair seating repairs. Sarah is increasingly involved in repairing technically advanced European skein work baskets and restoring Orkney straw work chairs. Sarah only uses locally sourced Somerset willow and rush materials and harvests her own rush. Are we good? With over a decade of teaching experience throughout the UK, Sarah regularly teaches her own Willow Day workshops and for organizations including the RHS and Somerset Rural Life Museum. Sarah is interested in research projects and education initiatives in the UK and Europe that seek to champion our craft heritage, exploring the impact of willow weaving in creative and therapeutical well-being services, and address the need to create a sustainable future for her craft form. This year, Sarah has exhibited her work in the UK touring basketry, rescuing, reviving, and retaining exhibition, and the Make Southwest Summer Show. Sarah is the 2025 Maker in Residence of Kelmscott Manor.
Hello, everyone. I think Biz has just done my first 2 pages. You might hear a repeat a bit. I can't ad lib like Sarah, so I'm going for my notes if that's okay. Here we go. Thank you for asking me to speak at this event. I'd like to share with you my experience of being a modern basket maker, designer, teacher. I am this year's Maker in Resident at Kelmscott Manor. Oh, are we there? It's on here, but not here. Okay. Yay! Brilliant. Making predominantly in willow, but also in rush material, I focus upon handcrafting work that marries heritage basket forms that showcase often advanced or lesser known traditional English basketry techniques with innovative ideas. In creating baskets, backpacks, lighting features, and chair seating that are perfect for modern living, my mission is to secure, evolve, and create a future for basket making and chair seating. Had to get the wetsuit in. I aim to highlight the beauty of natural materials and only make and teach with locally sourced materials, often harvested by myself. I believe that the commercial-led basket making methodology and the traditional English techniques and the skill set that I have been fortunate enough to learn are vital to the continuation of my heritage craft form. This is hugely influential for me. Both in the baskets that I make, design and make, and in my teaching, I continue to focus upon trying to find routes to enable the highly skilled and currently endangered techniques in basketry and its accompanying knowledge to be passed from craftsperson to craftsperson, thereby reaching future generations. To give you a more immediate understanding behind what I do and why, I'll explain the importance through my teaching. Over a decade ago, I established my freelance teaching business, creating 1- and 2-day willow workshops for groups of beginner and intermediate weavers. It is important to me that I design all the baskets that I teach, each created for a specific reason or function. Often so that I can impart and promote certain techniques or help and hone lesser taught English basketry knowledge. During every workshop, I make sure to talk about both our basketry heritage and our current UK commercial willow growing and basket making industry. I address the main barriers to our access in my craft form. This is done by advising on how to harvest and prepare willow, what tools to buy, and I demonstrate how to use them safely. I always mention top UK basket makers, attributing the techniques and tips that I have learned from them. At the beginning of every workshop we play, making a simple willow hoop, whilst I give tips on how to tune into the material. This is actually a brilliant method to help everyone connect with their willow, resulting in them creating better baskets. Willow's own inherent material properties of strength and flexibility, directness and flow, engage within the act of weaving with confidence, rhythm, motion, balance, and physical exertion. The resultant incredibly accessible energy, this intrinsic flow, creates a direct connection to nature, to self, and to those around us. I'm always in awe of the immediacy with which this happens, that through basket making, I can assist in this discovery for others, and in so doing, create inspiration, joy, hope, renewal, and self-belief. So many of us are drawn to baskets and to basket making. We feel the innate need as humans to make, to weave. Not only this, but basket making holds a great power for us humans, one that is an honour to be part of. For in our act of making, we are taking nature, living plants, deconstructing and reconstructing them into our chosen function and hopefully beautiful forms. More recently, I've been offering bespoke one-to-one and two-to-one tuition to intermediate basket makers from the UK and around the world at my Devon home garden studio. Along with no modern accreditation for being a master basket maker, there is a huge gap of progressive basket training and courses in the UK. I truly believe that as good as books, online courses, and YouTube videos can be, there is no substitute for decent tuition, and that this needs to be given by master craftspeople. In order to be both a full-time basket maker and sole household income provider, I have had to dedicate a vast amount of time and energy to running all aspects of my teaching business. Unlike most craft makers, in a previous career, I worked in creative business management at a uni. Without the knowledge and skills that I learnt there and continually refresh, I seriously doubt I would have survived this long. In terms of a viable future for my heritage craft form, for there to be the next young generation of full-time professional basket makers, I'm incredibly concerned. Not only has creativity, making, and the arts been crushed within our present education system, I have 2 teenage girls who can attest to this, but our present and what looks likely to be our future welfare state impedes, if not destroys, the ability of us as modern craft makers, of us as self-employed low-income earners to survive. You need to hear this bit, but yes, it does talk about the welfare state. It seems to be a little-known fact that within the universal credit system, the self-employed have to report their finances each month, and that after their business expenses have been deducted, have to have an income of around £1,600 a month in order to be eligible for the same welfare support that an employed person on £24,000 a year, the minimum wage of 35 hours a week, receives. This means that I have to be earning around £34,000 a year in order to receive basic welfare support for myself and my children. It's not possible. Believe me, I've tried. What's worse is that each month, the minimum income floor of £1,600 that I or any other maker or creative needs to reach in order to receive this welfare support isn't reset to zero. Our previous month's deficit is included, and the chances of us ever receiving any future welfare support further decreases. Couple this with inconsistent monthly earnings, myself and many other makers in the creative industries live in constant survival mode with no welfare support. We do not offer enough economic value, and therefore, in the eyes of the government, I believe we are being told we have and hold no value in our society. Creating and making, which I believe is a fundamental human need, is increasingly again becoming for the privileged few. Those of us who need to fight to change this, to create a future for our heritage craft forms, to make a better future for our next generation, well, we are often too worn down to do so. William Morris's words, that I do not want art for a few any more than education for a few or freedom for a few, still rings so true. And whilst I, as a modern maker, speak up, please listen. And please, if you can act upon the ability and the influence you have, help me to create positive change. I've now written stop shaking, because that means so much to me. Whilst developing as a basket maker over the past 12 years, I've actively sought out training from master craftspeople who are grounded in apprentice-led commercial basket making. I've self-funded 95% of my training, recognising early on in my basket making career that what I wanted training for was at the time less appreciated by funding bodies. In order to become the best basket maker I could be, in the time I have, I needed to just pay and do. This has included training with one of the last dedicated commercial basket makers on my local Somerset levels, 4th generation maker Eddie Barnard. Learning the traditional way, which is known as on the plank, was an incredibly rare opportunity to take on traditional English techniques and hear stories about the willow industry. Eddie used to tell me that with practice, 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 I would speed up and be able to make a living making baskets. If only that could be the case. Whilst learning from Eddie what I call my granny baskets, I realised that I would need to create a new range of far more expensive baskets that would respect them and my time with Eddie. I was very honoured that on his retirement, Eddie offered me all his basket making tools, including a Victorian wrapping iron, a stunning brass cleave, and his essential basketry knife. Using tools that have made thousands of baskets that have been held and used by multiple hands over generations, it really does make a difference. In terms of my own future training, my being able to train others, what I realise and what I require is funding. In recent years, as more basket makers have emerged and realised their need to teach in order to survive, I've seen a shift in which those makers, without the knowledge and ability that I believe are required, are teaching too early in their careers. This has led to a dilution of skills and sometimes poor representation of our craft. They understandably cannot often afford training, but someone like myself needs to be funded to train them. For myself, in terms of where I want to progress with my craft, in skein work and chair seating, this slide shows an incredibly rare example from around the 1860s. I need to be able to learn from the very few top makers in existence in the UK who hold the knowledge and technical ability. I strive both within my product range and now emerging artistic basketry to increase the demand for beautiful artisan lead work and have wholeheartedly embraced William Morris's ambition that the maker must be a fashion leader, then fashion will follow. That's really bad paraphrasing. My evolving collection showcases a contemporary distinctive style. When designing and building my own website last year, I created an online shop. Although I do sell my work at exhibitions through galleries and with one online retailer, this is unprofitable. I have to think about that cut as publicity money. Instead, I need to sell direct to my customers, either via my website or at shows such as Craft Festival. With a passion for the arts and crafts movement and an understanding of the highly skilled traditional basketry techniques needed to create whole willow seating, it was natural for me to research Ernest Jimson's willow seated chair at the Wilson Museum in Cheltenham and then choose to reinterpret his work. Lawrence has also made for me a Jimson early 3A chair frame identical to the one in the Wilson Museum, yet to be seated. I would love to find the funding to create a short film showing the process of my whole willow seating, becoming both a teaching tool for this rarely undertaken type of seating and as an aspirational film for other weavers. Occasionally, I undertake basket and chair seating repairs. Doing such work is difficult to quote for, and I know that I underestimate my expertise. It was a privilege to fulfill and over half a lifetime's dream to restore an Orkney chair. The client and I made the decision to show all the repair work on this child's chair, for which I used Orkney-grown black oak straw and made marram grass cordage. Like visible darning on an old, well-loved hand-me-down jumper, every new stitch reveals little lives lived. This most beautiful and very fragile willow basket sent to me from the USA was an amazing and somewhat terrifying challenge to clean, mend, and do an invisible repair on, whilst keeping for the client the basket's character. My subsequent understanding, ability, and confidence with skein work fine basketry all deepened by undertaking this repair, highlighting to me the type of basketry and chair seating that I wish to in the future excel at. The Norwich exhibition in 2022 at the Craft Studies Centre in Surrey was the first time that I have exhibited my work. As one of 16 UK-wide makers, all of us working in Willow, following taking part in a CPD business programme led by Cockpit Arts in 2021, us makers decided that the best way to up our profiles and prices was to create our own exhibition. Being a lead organiser was a lot of work, but we gained funding, a very good venue, brilliant curatorship, and recognition. In 2024 to 2025, the UK-wide touring exhibition Basketry, Rescuing, Reviving, Retaining showcased 2 of my O's baskets. To have my work exhibited alongside the UK's top makers was incredible. I will often study baskets in museum collections, make a replica, and then create my own contemporary version that retains the knowledge, techniques, and skill set. My replica Sky O's basket, seen on the right, was exhibited alongside my contemporary O's basket on the left. I've become known for my O's baskets and taken the now endangered basketry technique of skein work forward into more sculptural forms. By taking a white willow rod and splitting, cleaving, and shaving the wood into fine ribbons known as skeins, the willow can then be wrapped and layered into textured ripples that catch the light. These baskets are in my latest exhibition at Make Southwest. And now finally to Kelmscott Manor, it's worth it. My residency this year has fulfilled everything I've ever hoped it could be. Being awarded this residency was, as you've probably gathered, much needed and very timely. It's no exaggeration to say that it's confirming my purpose, my existence, giving me the strength to keep fighting for what I believe in. Within a world that I often feel out of time in, we, that's both the Manor and myself, stand, I think, in fragile defiance. And we, that's again the Manor and myself, have taken on an incredible gift to not only be rejuvenated, but also help to rejuvenate, energize, and transform those we meet. Feeling so at home within the house and the grounds, the residency has gifted me moments to enable inspiration to flood in. By being close to cherished objects, including experimental works by Morris, by spending time within their craft, I've learned to explore more, to play, to dream again. I'm beginning to believe again that obstinate determination and hard graft can achieve great things. Leading a series of drop-in sculpture workshops has shown me that joy again of being able to teach both the young and those who would never think of attending basket making workshops, to imbue the qualities of willow and the act of weaving to everyone at Kelmscott is so wonderful. These 50 or so leaves will be installed as a community sculpture along the yard wall opposite the Learning Barn for the 2026 season. Over 4 demonstrations, I've been able to show the craft of natural materials and explain the importance of reviving endangered basketry skills and techniques, from demonstrating skein work to making traditional English willow square and oval work to rush seating a Liberty's chair. Prior to the residency, I already felt that so many of William Morris's ideas and values are held within what I create each day, in what I strive to make, to achieve, in how, what, and why I teach, and in how I live, but now I know this is the case. Responding to my time at Kelmscott, I have developed a Morris-inspired basket collection that showcases our willow basketry heritage. Each basket is designed and handcrafted by myself, inspired by the Morris family and their homes, and encapsulates the ethos of the arts and crafts movement. This basket, for example, is an interpretation of a traditional English berry basket, and the side weave is about the bark pattern on the mesmerising old willow tree in the meadow. I've deliberately created this basket to promote a variety of willow, Harrison's bee, that has just been brought into commercial growing production on the Somerset levels. This one's for May. Being at the Manor has ignited amazing conversations with brilliant staff, volunteers and visitors that has led to much research, exciting, ever-opening pathways and a deepening understanding of my work and myself. But one more. Can I just show you the last one? You need to see what I'm going to make. I'm currently creating my physical asset to be retained by the Society in Kelmscott Manor. This basketry piece will represent my time at the Manor and be a culmination of my exploration, rejuvenation and inspiration. For example, I'm finally experimenting with science type printing on willow. I'm currently pushing myself to create a piece of work using a method that, as far as I'm aware, has not been undertaken in the UK in over 100 years. I do this to forward our knowledge of my craft form, to prove my ability to myself and hopefully to inspire the present and next generation of willow weavers. You can see Morris there, just with a fishing creel. That's what's inspiring me. My physical asset is an interpretation of Morris's creel. So far, it's taken me many hours of repeated experimenting with the construction, with laboriously making the willow skeins, with getting to grips with the nuances of the weaving. There are no written instructions or diagrams detailing how to create such a basket. There are no craftspeople who use this method to learn from. But beside me as I make, I have a copy of one ink drawing, a French antique skein work fishing creel to examine and marvel at, and I've got Morris to inspire me. Thank you.
So we've got 5 minutes to have some questions. So if the other 2 panelists / residents want to come up, and I know we might have some questions from the online participants as well. So any questions? Anyone from online? Just because I don't want to ignore those who are spending time on the other side. Yes? Oh, in the back.
You'll just need to be microphone. Have the mic first.
Thank you. When you're talking about shell gold, I'm afraid I missed what you were talking about in the break. What is shell gold?
So shell gold is basically gold paint that's made from crushing multiple leaves of gold. The reason it's called shell gold is because the resulting paint would be typically stored in shells, which are like nature's little pots, really. But yeah, you grind the gold in honey, and what the honey does, it stops the gold leaf kind of cold welding. So you grind it for a good few hours. I did it for 8 hours. And then you wash the gold. And then when you come to paint with it, you use a bit of gum arabic, a little bit like you would watercolor.
Oh, okay. Why were shells used there, like in particular, then to the
I
point that
think
it's become
that, like they were found, like the way that people were using things in the past was just so much more like innate to what was in the landscape, and like shells, little scallop shells are just the wonderful little container. They would use them for paints as well. And you can see, so manuscripts are a wonderful way to sort of see how people worked as well, because often there'd be a little self-portrait of the artist with their shell or and the brush and working away. So yeah, it was just what they had and what the landscape was giving them.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks everyone. That was really fascinating. My question's for Sarah. Is it Davis? Yeah. Sarah, I just wanted to ask you about, I thought it was really interesting your sort of personal history that kind of informed the work for Kelmscott as well, and your continuing work. And that kind of sort of contradiction within the piece, right? It's hidden, but then there's a magnifying glass to scrutinize it. So I just wondered, like going forward, are those kind of, because you showed us your prints, but the work in Kelmscott was also very sculptural. And I just wonder whether that is continuing, this kind of notion of housing, which also kind of, I suppose, speaks to, a type of armor as well for illness and the ill body.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really glad that sort of came across, and it's a really interesting point. I think and I like that you said the housing of work as well, because I think the frame is one way we can look at it, but the frame can go so much more beyond just the functionality of protecting a work. Like there can be that the act of revelation, or the imagery or the ornament or the carving in the frame being like almost, I kind of see the frames I'm working on now as like an exoskeleton, like a layer of protection, and just thinking about how what we do and what we make can also have that narrative. Like narrative is so imbued in the creation of work, whether it's in clearly narrative because there's maybe figurative elements, or there's a narrative imbued in it through the act of making. And I think that really sits within carving, because there's such the physical act of cutting into a material, which is innately bodily in a way and has its resonances with surgery and things like that. So my thinking with making is very much how the body kind of has that relationship to the final piece, definitely.
I think we have one more question in the time slot. Anyone else? We'll have more. Yes.
This is a question for Sarah about your baskets. And at first I thought it was indigo. Have you used indigo dye at all? Maybe you could talk a bit about that.
Yes, it is. It's indigo dye that I then taught myself, really, a natural vat fermentation process, and I play with. And it's been interesting for me exploring the natural dyes, and that's what I want to, part of what I'm doing is I want to get into that more and see what I can do with the willow and colour on white willow. Yeah.
Well, we'll have more to discuss, I think, at the roundtable. I mean, infinite questions and such a rich topic. But thank you so much to the three panelists and the wonderful experience of this residency for the 3 years. I think I can speak to everyone that it was quite inspiring, and seeing all three of you have different experiences in your time, but similar inspiration and excitement moments. So congratulations, and excited to see where you guys go. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. So we'll have a short break now. We'll take about 10 minutes and come back here at 3:15 to start the next panel. Thank you.
I have been invited to undertake a double check of the sound, and also to see if you're finished, if you'd be glad to take your seat so we can start with the next session. I'm told that it's working, but people aren't listening. Sit down. Well, I hope you've had a wonderful break. I've just gotten the go ahead, so I'll jump in. It is such a pleasure today to participate in the event. I do thank Anouska for the kind invitation. Hannah Britton talked about how well people have been responding to new ideas, and I don't disagree. And I haven't been there in person, and I do appreciate the ability to participate remotely. But I do think these are actually very old ideas, ideas that go back to the foundation of the society in 1707. We're all familiar with the phrasing that the aims are the furtherance of the study and knowledge of antiquities and history. But back when it was founded, it was just a small informal group of people with curious minds who met at the Bear Tavern on the Strand to talk about how old things were made and why, and to have a drink, which is exactly what you're doing today, but in a much nicer setting. So like many of you, I consider making and reconstruction and creative response as a form of research into objects of the past. Sarah Le Breton said that creating and making is a vital human need. Sarah, I think I got that exactly as you said it. If not, it's very close to your words. But I think it's also a vital research need, one that is as necessary and valid as any peer-reviewed published output. My own context is late medieval and early modern printmaking. The details differ, but the underlying principles are the same. Sarah made a very strong case that we makers and historical remakers and researchers of the things of the past need support. I hope that this kind of program is not a one-off, but the start of a new kind of really enriching engagement with the Antiquaries collections and the communities that it engages. But you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to the speakers. So with no further ado, I will introduce the first. And that is Sohaila Baluch, an interdisciplinary artist and writer. And,
Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I forgot to update you that the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of an introduction from our staff member, Michelle. So if Michelle can take over briefly and then do an introduction from Sohaila. Again, apologies, that was my fault. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle briefly and then she'll hand back to you to introduce Sohaila.
Wonderful, thank you. Michelle.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Anouska. Thanks very much, everybody, for the change of plan quite late on. So yeah, I'm only going to say a few words. I'm Dr. Michelle Johansson. I'm the Learning and Outreach Manager here at the Society of Antiquaries. So my role is not dissimilar to Hannah's at Kelmscott Manor. And so Hannah oversees this extraordinary Maker in Residence program at Kelmscott Manor that we've all been hearing about today. And we were very inspired by Hannah's program. And so when we developed our latest lottery-funded project, which is Magna Carta 1225, we decided we would have Maker in Residence role as part of that project. And if you've been in this room here over the summer, you would have seen it transformed into a magical woodland glade, because it was emphasizing the Charter of the Forest, which was part of the original Magna Carta. And so this extraordinary medieval legal document that we had on display here, along with other treasures from our collections. And as part of that project, we decided we were going to advertise for a Maker in Residence. But for us, it was a kind of pilot project. So we weren't doing it as extravagantly as they managed to do it at the Manor, partly because we don't have the space for people to make things on site. You've seen, I know, this room, you've seen the council room opposite. Most of you have also seen the library upstairs. We don't actually have a learning space here. So when I teach school groups, I teach them in this room or the room opposite. So we couldn't have a Maker in Residence here creating things because we just don't have the space for it. So we decided to dial it back a little bit, and it's more of a kind of a maker in a rush, or a maker popping by, rather than a Maker in Residence, because rather than having a Maker in Residence here for months at a time, we've just got makers in residence here for a few days. But when we put out our advertisement for a Maker in Residence for the Magna Carta 1225 project, we had two incredibly strong candidates and couldn't choose between them. So what we decided to do, because of their skill sets, we decided to kind of split the role in two, although we still kept it at the same length of time. And we had one maker in residence who was our Magna Carta maker in residence, and the other was our Charter of the Forest maker in residence. And the former would have an interest in medieval lawmaking and in civil rights, and the latter would have an interest in environmental issues. And the lottery very kindly agreed that we could divert some funding towards having two makers in residence rather than one. And so that's exactly what we did. And we've had these two makers in residence here, creating, inspired by our collections, ever since August, and their residences are both now coming to an end. And they're going to speak to you today about the work they've been doing. So that's all I wanted to say on the Maker in Residence programme here at the Society of Antiquaries. And I'll now hand back to the chair to introduce Sahela. Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that we are in what's effectively the making and teaching room. It's very fitting. Sahela, are you around? Sahela Baluch is an interdisciplinary artist and writer. And Sahela's hybrid art practice spans performance, moving image, photography, and text. Her research combines embodied, performative, and autoethnographic methods. And drawing from lived experience, she positions the brown female body as a living archive to interrogate the politics of visibility, misrepresentation, and refusal. Through repetition, vernacular gesture, and acts of quiet defiance. Like my voice at the minute. Her work explores female diasporic identity, unbelonging, and the labor of representation. Sahela is a PhD candidate at the Royal College of Arts London, supported by a LAP AHRC scholarship. Her performances include events at the Beaconsfield Gallery in London and Bishopsgate Institute. And her writing appears in a number of venues. And I think we are all very excited to hear what she has to say and see what she has to share. On that note, Sahela.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Before I start, I just wanted to say thank you to the organisers and to the Society for inviting me today to speak. So as Elizabeth said, I am Anne Michelle. I am an artist, writer, and doctoral researcher, and one of the Magna Carta makers in residence 2025. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my practice, and then I will talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing here and what this residency has inspired. So I work across live performance, live durational performance, moving image, and lens-based media, installation, and text, as in a way, I suppose, as forms of embodied theory, to explore the politics of the brown female body, memory, and space. I am particularly interested in how power operates across systems of representation, visibility, and legibility. And I am also really kind of looking at, I suppose, the act of looking and being seen. Like, you know, who gets to look, how, and on whose terms. Specifically, I'm looking at, you know, from my position. So within my work, positionality is a really important and key thing. So I am looking at how British women artists of South Asian heritage, how they, how that identity is negotiated and challenged and reshaped through artistic practice. How do we as artists carve out space for ourselves or are denied space within and beyond institutional frameworks? Although I use the term British South Asian woman within my research and within my practice, I do so critically. It is a strategic and unstable placeholder. It names a provisional space that I move through with care and resistance, because the systems that I critique require some form of legibility in order to grant access. So as you'll see in the works that I show, I use my body as material and method, as an archive and threshold, often performing gestures of repetition, of labor, exhaustion, and endurance. So it was really interesting to listen to the talks earlier, because in a way, I suppose I kind of approach craft through that idea of labor, through the actual kind of bodily sort of toll that craft processes kind of take on you. So I'm just going to talk a bit about a few works. This was a film that I developed at the end of last year under the mentorship of the Derek Jarman Lab. And it's been shown in different iterations, screened in the cinema. It's been developed as an installation evoking a 1980s British South Asian living room within a gallery space, and as a site-specific, and also as a site-specific kind of intervention into a Grade 2 listed house in Bloomsbury, where I was particularly interested in how very different histories were rubbing together. And I mean, that's something I think that my work sort of sits in that sort of space of friction, I guess. The work itself is a very kind of intimate and disobedient film. It's an essay film, and it interrogates the politics of representation and the gaze. And it sort of emerges through this kind of process of reading, of dancing and writing in dialogue with thinkers and artists who question how racialized and gendered bodies are seen and framed and made legible. So I basically juxtaposed a durational dance performance. So I danced for, I think it was about 8 hours, nonstop in a studio, and it's against a shifting green screen. And I tell you this in the film as well, because it's very much about that sort of the voiceover kind of, it weaves in sort of personal and collective memories of kind of displacement, of migration, but also everyday kind of experiences. And I really kind of wanted people to be sort of kind of to kind of sit with that sort of instability of identity and of a culture as well, because it's a constantly shifting landscape. So alongside my moving image practice, my live performances explore care, labor, and belonging. I also think about how bodies like mine circulate in images, in institutions, in inherited scripts of visibility, and how small acts of disruption might open other ways of being seen. This work and the performance work that goes with it, they begin with the body. It's dressed, it's posed, it's repeated, but it moves beyond kind of representation to ask what it means to be looked at and how refusal can exist within that gaze. Within this space, I kind of use repetition and ornament to think about how racialized and diasporic bodies are made decorative or consumable. And I sort of turn my own image into this patterned kind of surface. I sort of deliberately kind of inhabit the stereotype in order to unsettle it. You know, so, and also I kind of draw a lot from textile histories. So here there's this kind of echo of the textile print, the domestic ornament, but it's also about how can I disturb it? So, you know, it's sort of looking directly back. It's kind of unsettling that gaze. And it's also this sort of idea of kind of working against spectacle. So in this performance, Sipping in Between, I came into the gallery space. I staged a kind of sort of encounter initially with the image that you see on the floor, which is it's kind of mimicking the ethnographic portrait, and it's sort of me in a star jump pose. And I sort of placed that on the floor, and I kind of came into this space, and I literally just drank a cup of tea from a bone china cup, and then I left. And there was this real sort of sense of expectation from the audience. I think they sort of were waiting for me to maybe sort of dance or tell a story or tell a kind of narrative. And so for me, it's that kind of how much do you translate for the audience, and how much do you give? You know, so it's kind of this constant sort of thing between sort of being visible, but then also kind of refusing that kind of visibility. And I suppose in a way it's that kind of confrontation with the colonial gaze. Oh my gosh, I need to kind of speed up a bit. I didn't realize that I was going to be so slow. So I'm going to kind of just quickly zoom through these works. So the next set of works, again, these are kind of these were durational works where I stayed in the gallery for 8 hours a day over a period of weeks. And I was engaged in this kind of process of unmaking, so taking apart something that had sort of that was an item that had a family connection. So a lot of my items are kind of reclaimed, they're passed down, they're kind of, you know, things that maybe my mum had made or had sourced from Pakistan or Baluchistan. And the idea is of kind of sort of undoing those kind of colonial sort of legacies that are embedded in these materials through this act of unmaking, through this very kind of dull, repetitive process of just sitting there and just taking apart. I did the same with this piece, and I think it was Alison who was talking about sprigging. I can't remember, was it? Sprig making. So this kind of draws from that tradition where I was sprigging muslin. So it's a different type of sprigging, but I was sprigging muslin with garden twist ties because I kind of wanted to sort of break that, I guess, that kind of history that it is, because when we think of sprigged muslin, we think of like Jane Austen, and we think of, you know, this kind of very sort of English tradition, but actually originated in Dhaka in Bangladesh. And I kind of wanted to sort of draw attention to the kind of labor of the brown body and those kind of, and the bodies that sort of sustain this practice, which are often kind of overlooked in histories and overlooked in the narrative. Again, similar thing. So working with reclaimed jute mooring ropes. And I was sort of inserting, I kind of wanted to sort of disrupt the history of these objects because, again, it's a very violent history. And so kind of thinking of the type of materials that would, that could intervene and could disrupt it in a way that would that would also be talking to its own history. So I was kind of so here I used black bobby pins, and then I'm going to quickly shoot through a performance that I did at Bishopsgate Institute, where I was trying to surface hidden histories of and overlooked histories of South Asian women and their activism and their sort of lived experiences of racism. And this, in this process, I was basically writing on fabric. I was writing stories that I'd uncovered in the archive, but also my own personal stories. And then I spent the time erasing them. So it was heat erasable ink, and I spent the time writing and then erasing the text. So it was just this kind of idea of how difficult it is to surface these histories, how much labor it takes. And so moving to the Society of Antiquaries, as Michelle said, I had put a proposal to think through the Magna Carta, to sort of respond to it, I guess, through performance, and through this kind of, through the idea of kind of embodiment and embodied knowledge. And so this was one of the first performances that I did, where I kind of wanted to disrupt the sacred kind of origin of this document. So I had lots of copies, again, a reference to the multiple copies of the Magna Carta, and I had, during the performance, I was annotating them, I was tearing them up, I was kind of throwing them down into the balcony space. And what was brilliant was how, you know, people, like you can see this little kid there who turned it into a paper plane, and I just loved that kind of, you know, changing this, you know, this very kind of mythical document into a thing that we can kind of play and handle and change, you know, because it's fluid, it's not static, it's something that can and should shift. And with that, I also developed a performance, a live performance in the council room, where, again, I was sort of responding to, you know, the exclusions within the Magna Carta, and, you know, how it was, again, a very embodied sort of a piece, and it was sort of really kind of asking people whose rights actually count, and if you could change the law, if you could rewrite it, what would you change? And that was, I mean, so I spent the duration just spinning around and kind of throwing these kind of interjections into the space. Okay, and so I'm kind of over time, but just very quickly to say the responses I had were, you know, really incredible, because I mean, one, in terms of the audience that came, yes, there was my sort of usual art audience who came to see me, but there were also people who were very specifically who had come to see the Magna Carta, and suddenly they were being asked to actually look at it in a very different way. And, you know, so some of the responses I had from people, it was really, really incredible, because, you know, they sort of were like, I hadn't thought of that, and I hadn't thought of it in that way. And, you know, so yeah, so that was great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I have many, many questions. I'm sure that others do as well. I will save those for the end, as following the template. It's very exciting to turn the concept on its head and think about unmaking as a performative and creative practice as a response to research. So thank you for that. Our next speaker approaches materials in a very different way. Tamsin Loxley is a multidisciplinary artist, and her practice investigates the language of the land through materiality, experimental print, and agroecological practices. There's a deep connection to memory and place. She's a 2025 MA Print graduate from the Royal College of Art, supported by a Leverhulme Scholarship, and she's been a creative director and graphic designer for over 25 years. Alongside this, she's been instrumental in a number of creative and educational and nature connection initiatives. She's won a number of major awards, including the Travers Smith CSR Art Program, the Woolwich Contemporary Print Fair Graduate Award, and the Rosemary Simmons Stone Lithography Prize. Rooted in a regenerative farming practice in Devon, her work is a diaristic archive that reflects on our relationship with the land and soil and nature, and how the decisions we make become part of the landscape's memory. And she asks how these artistic and land-based practices can inform one another, how this can shape our relationship with the future of the natural world and how we care for it. So knowledge gathering and experimentation guide her approach. She also photographs the land monthly, keeps a visual and written diary, and works with natural site-specific materials, such as oak gall ink, and willow and bone charcoal, and soil and plants and wool. And these materials, which are unpredictable and alive, carry the essence of the place. So I look forward to learning more about how her work explores that which is both intimate and expansive, beyond the intellectual. So with that note, I will disappear and hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I think it's all been said. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honour. So I'm going to talk about my process, my work, and how my research on the Charter of the Forest has influenced my practice. So my work investigates the language of the land, as just said, and sits alongside a regenerative farming project on a 34-acre site in Devon. This is a photograph of that place, where the increasing wilderness and the agroecological practices shape what I make and how I work. So these are our Gotland sheep. They are much loved. They are grey. I don't know if any of you saw the wool, but that's the colour of the sheep. And I run this project with my mum and my sister, and it's the basis of all of my work. Oh, I have a small gift which will be making its way round all of you. It's an acorn. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn." So oaks can live for 1,000 years and are cornerstones of our woodland ecosystems. So when you get an acorn in your hand, it holds that potential. So you will hold in your hand that potential. And at the base of my work is the belief that we need to relearn how to appreciate the land and place greater importance on natural intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Excuse my enormous head. Just for you guys, I thought you might be interested. There's a scheduled monument on this land. It's a medieval beacon site. And I often think about the history embedded in the soil and silently sort of witnessing me trampling around up there. And I love the fact that I know that it's in there, and it makes me think about all of the things that have gone on this land before my family. So just into my practice. So I photograph the land monthly and keep a visual and written diary. Knowledge gathering and experimentation are my guide, and this diary helps me record and get to know the land. So it starts in September. I'm not quite sure why it starts. I think I started doing this in September. I've been doing it for about 5 years. I take about 200 photographs a month. I have so many photographs, and you can see that everything from like detail shots on the right to sort of broader views and the trees on the left. So into my first piece of work that I'm going to show you. So we're going to jump around a bit from work to process. So this work is called This Shared Ground, and it explores how all things exist in relation to each other. One piece of land connects to the next, one person's actions affect another, one tree's roots intertwine with another's. It's about what lies between things, the instinctual, the irrational, the balance of power, the messy, the unpredictable, the wild. It's about ways of viewing. So this is made with charcoal that I've made from the bones and the wood that I found on the land. So it's a screen print, and I've pushed the charcoal powder through the screen. And we're going to talk a little bit about the plinth in the front. So the next slide is an aerial view of this plinth, and it's a little bit about the materials. So this holds the artifacts of my process, and it's materials that I've gathered from the land. So dandelion fibre, sheep bone, wool, oak galls, leaves, nettle fibre, silver birch, goat willow, and molehill soil. These balls on the right-hand side are made out of molehill soil. I like to think I have a little friendship with a mole that digs up quite a large part of the land. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the book now in the middle. So this book is called On the Hill, and the land that I work with is at the very top of a hill and it overlooks the Axe Valley. So this diary practice is my way of reflecting on how our decisions become part of the landscape's memory and the wilderness it supports. So I explore whether there's a symbiotic relationship between artistic and land-based practices. And my practice is a kind of wondering about, does this practice affect the way that I steward the land? And that's why I started this practice, was to get to know the land. So we're going to talk a little bit about materiality and materials, and then we're going to talk a little bit about process. So materials and materiality are central to my work, and I wonder if these materials can connect us to historical ways of making and thinking. So I make charcoal from willow, birch, and bone, ink from oak, and I gather plants, wool, and soil. So for me, these materials are alive, each with its own character and unpredictability. For me, they carry the essence of the place. And on the following slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I process them. I'm not going to talk about the molehill soil, but they seem quite popular. So they're on the far left over there. I just gather it, and those balls are formed. It's just soil and water. So charcoal. So I make charcoal from wood and bone. That's a slightly gruesome photo, but that is the reality. Hopefully it's not a too often reality, but one of our sheep died, and so the wilderness stripped it clean, and I collected the bones, and I have made charcoal from bones and from wood. So it's a slow process, but it connects me physically and conceptually to the land. And with this charcoal, I draw. So I do blindfold drawing. So working without sight lets me engage instinctually to feel the materials in the moment, letting the land be my guide. Nettle fibre, it's one of my favorites and one I could spend a whole year just, it's hugely versatile plant with strong links to our history. As early as the Bronze Age, it was used for food, medicine, and making fine thread string and rope. This is a future project. Dandelion fibre, it's more fragile and regular. This marks a moment in spring. In fact, every material that I use marks a moment in the cycle of the year. Oak gall ink was used to write the Magna Carta and the Charter of the Forest. And when I make this ink, I often wonder if those who made it then would have approved of my methods. I often think they would quite like my cooker. And interestingly, I'm using nopper galls up on the top left, which arrived in the UK only in the 1950s. They would have used marble galls, which are perfectly round. So no two batches of oak gall ink are ever the same. And it's a reminder to me that perfection and uniformity are impossible. I have tried to make them the same, but they never are. So on to this next piece of work is called land memory. So the materials themselves often dictate the methods and the shape of the work. And these oak gall pieces are abstract in form, evoking land and wilderness, light and dark, the inner landscape and the outer. They connect to the soil that sustains us and the land we walk on and the passing of time. And here I'm thinking about how landscapes embed themselves in memory and how those memories are shared, different for each of us, yet connected. This one's called shared memory. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Charter of the Forest. So signed in 1225 on the Runnymede marshlands, it gave common people the rights to land for subsistence and grazing and the end of harsh punishments. And a yew tree, the Yankowick yew, stood witness, and it's still standing there today. Now, some people say it's 1,000 years old, and some say it's 3,000 years old. Well, that is really old. And it's just the most magnificent tree trunk. But I like the idea that trees have their roots in history and their branches in the present, sort of living antiquities, silently witnessing the lives we lead. So here is the Magna Carta. I don't know if many of you came to the exhibition, but this was written in oak gall ink. Here's a few more pieces of my research down here kind of relating to it, and some swatches that demonstrate that there are lots of colours you get from oak gall ink. So as a born and bred Londoner, an unexpected custodian of this land and a novice farmer, I thought a lot about the history of the land, land justice, regeneration and legacy. And this led me to the Charter of the Forest and its importance. And as part of this research, I asked, why do I own land? And should I own land? And should anybody own land? And historically, land was power, wealth, and survival. And from the land came food, shelter, medicine, resources. Those who controlled land could generate income and exert power. So the Charter was a pivotal moment, giving rights to the common people, the beginning of human rights. And 800 years on, after imperfect land management, revolutions, the enclosures, colonialism, the commons barely exist. However, these legal frameworks set out in the original Charter of the Forest could give us a good structure to work on. So while I've been researching here, I've reflected on my responsibility to the land, the community, and future generations, and also to the way that I make work. Perhaps it's time for a new charter for trees, for nature, for the commons. Could air or soil or mountains or rivers, energy become the commons? Or, thinking about it slightly differently, could a tree have rights, or a river, or a mountain, or the seas? Could we collectively steward what sustains us? So that's what I've been researching and working with people while I've been here. And many thinkers like lawyers, activists, artists are exploring this together across the world right now. And perhaps it started here with the Charter of the Forest. So for me, I'm going to continue working with this small patch of Devon, sharing it as much as possible, protecting its wilderness, making, crafting, creating art, and looking after the land, the sheep, and the trees, remembering that our actions create history that embeds in the soil and what grows there. Now, I have one quote, and this quote is my guide. And if I don't know what to do, this is where I go to. So the name of our proper connection to the earth is good work. For good work involves much giving of honor. It honors the source of its materials. It honors the place where it is done. It honors the art by which it is done. It honors the thing that it makes and the user of the made thing. Thank you, Wendell Berry, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tamsin, for that fascinating presentation. It's intriguing to think about the ways that our actions create history, as you said, especially given the context of Sohaila's engagement with how our actions can unmake and engage with that history as well. So wonderful, wonderful fodder for discussion. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce Sue Heiser. But first, Anouska, is there anything that you need to say?
No, sorry, you're fine, carry on.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, our final speaker in this panel is Sue Heiser. She's an author, an illustrator, and teacher with a lifelong interest in jewelry art. Her career began in archaeology, working as a finds assistant for the Museum of London, and then an illustrator of English heritage, drawing on ancient jewellery from all over Britain. She's accomplished in a huge variety of jewellery making techniques with silversmithing and enameling and lampwork. Now, her project and technique books have been published all over the world in many languages. And Sue is currently researching Anglo-Saxon beads of Britain and using her lampwork skills to investigate the likely techniques of ancient bead makers. And she lectures on the subject at museums and universities. Her latest book, Anglo-Saxon Beads 400 to 700, a visual guide, was published just a couple of months ago. She was elected a fellow of the Society in January 2025 for her work on ancient beads. So let's hear about this work on ancient beads. I will disappear and hand over.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today, and what a fascinating day it has been, and still more to come. Wonderful. So, my talk is about Anglo-Saxon beads. They've taken over my life for the last 8 years. And originally, I worked in archaeology, and I became fascinated at the beginning of my career. I've gone off and done other things, learned a lot of jewelry making, different types of techniques. And now, later in my career, I decided to return to my roots and really give a good look, a good new look at Anglo-Saxon beads, bringing my skills from my past, which has been, in fact, invaluable. So, starting here, where do these beads all come from? Here is a map showing dots of the Anglo-Saxon cemeteries found in Britain. And this particular map was 1983. There's been an awful lot more found since. So drilling down, this is Mucking in Essex, a large cemetery that I did some of the drawings for at the beginning of my career. And you can see a scatter of graves. The biggest cemetery we know about is Spong Hill in Norfolk, and over 2,000 burials, cremations and inhumations, that both types were used. The inhumations are the most interest to me because sadly, cremations burn everything. So going down further, this one is a grave from Portway East in Andover, and you can see how some reports have wonderful maps of where the beads are found. Here's a scatter around the pelvis, and you can see that the beads were not around the neck in that case. They were probably in a bag. And this is the jawbone here, and there's another scatter, 2 necklaces. Here, another one from Sewerby in Yorkshire, and you can see the scatter of beads there. The early Anglo-Saxons buried their dead with all their clothes, jewelry, weapons, and other artifacts arranged in the grave. These are little time capsules, a fascinating thing. This practice died out during the late 7th and early 8th centuries, but we have a rich heritage of excavated cemeteries with literally thousands and thousands of finds all stashed away in British museums. And here you can see a mock-up of an Anglo-Saxon grave of a woman with her beads and various other things, a little cup here. There's nearly always a knife. And it's good to get close to these people, and this is the way we can do it, find out more about them. This is the necklace that started it all, the one on the outside here. This is from Portway, and back at the beginning of my career, in 1976, it landed on my desk, and I drew it, and I was absolutely delighted with this. It just simply fascinated me. A 12 to 14-year-old girl buried with this beautiful necklace and a pouch and various other things as well. But the variety of color in these necklaces began to fascinate me. So here are some examples of the people and what they would have worn as their daily clothes. We get quite a lot of information. The textiles do not survive well at all, only on corrosion in next to brooches. But the one on the left is a typical East Anglian type of dress that they have pieced together, and the beads are hung at the front. Don't want our beads going around the back of our neck. Why? Why hide them? Let's have them all at the front, pinned with brooches. And this is a costume found in Kent, wonderful braids. These were sophisticated people. They really were. Here is an example of the beads in a grave when it's being excavated. And you can see the tangle, lots of different types. They all look very decayed and very muddy. This picture here is from Scunthorpe Museum, or it's called North Links Museum. And it really is a beautiful museum for beads. Highly recommended. It's a small local museum. I've trekked around the country looking at a lot of the smaller museums, and not very many museums have the beads on show, but the Scunthorpe Museum is an absolute exception to the rule. And the storerooms are stuffed with more and more beautiful beads. Most people want to concentrate, well, the museums, they want to display all the gold, all the weapons, the beads are the Cinderellas. So you really need to go and hunt them out and dig. So examples of Anglo-Saxon beads, those on show in museums are a tiny percentage of those found to date. And thousands are hidden away. Most common is glass and amber, but we also have metal, gold, silver, copper, alloy, rock crystal, amethyst, jet, shell, fossil. There isn't time to tell you where all these come from. An awful lot of these materials were imported, such as the amethysts and the shells, cowries from the Red Sea, and so on. A lot of importing went on. Here is a picture of some beads in Norwich Castle Museum. East Anglia is particularly rich in beads. You can see they're quite decayed. A huge range of designs and colours, though. It's extraordinary. Here we have crystal, and there's often a lot of amber. More about that in a minute. Beads in Anglo-Saxon graves are both imported and made locally. So here we are with some amber. You can see how very tatty they look. And this is what amber looks like if it's fully polished. And the Anglo-Saxon amber came from the Baltic, and some are from the east coast of Britain. And the amber is about 35 million years old. So a wonderful old material that the Anglo-Saxons absolutely adored. And here are some glass beads. These are in the Cambridge University Museum, and you can see how tatty they can end up. So I decided that it was essential to work out what they would have looked like, because otherwise, how can any of us understand how glorious they were if they all looked tatty? And the answer to do that was to make replicas and trying to copy the old designs as much as I could. And here is a picture of some beads made by me. And I was thrilled to start this project doing that, making the beads. I had to learn the skill. I went off and learned spent a day learning how to make the beads. And I thought, no, I've got to be an apprentice Anglo-Saxon. Therefore, I'm going to just muddle my way through. And I did. Talk about muddle at times. So I learned how to make hot glass beads, but I only used the tools available in antiquity. And that was important, because if you start using all these fancy modern things, you're not trying to simulate how they must have struggled, quite frankly. So it has helped me work out how the different types of beads were made and how to use the correct terminology, bead makers' terminology. Okay, it's not Anglo-Saxon language, but the bead makers have their own terminology, which the archaeologists have completely failed to pick up. Archaeologists often use invented terms that are never used by glass workers, which stops the dialogue between the modern makers and the understanding. Archaeologists have made assumptions how beads were made when they have no understanding of how hot glass behaves. I don't want to spend this talk knocking archaeologists, and in fact, I'm an archaeologist, but I do feel the experimental side is vital for us to really understand the crafts of old. And this one goes back to the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, and further back. Finally, because of all these errors, past typologies have been affected, and naming of the types of beads the meaning of types. Beads made entirely different ways may be put together and vice versa. So if your typology is wrong, you are in trouble, aren't you? These are the tools I use that were available at the time. And here I've got very simple tools. You can see there's hardly any. There's only 5 different sets, or 5 or 6 pieces, and you have got a mandrel, which the beads are all made on. And here we have the materials I use. Glass rods were available 3,500 years ago, BC. Tesserae, a handy way of importing glass, and the threads that I make. And here is a drawing of an Anglo-Saxon bead maker, probably using a simple furnace showing the type that might have been used, and my blowtorch and how I'd use it. So here is a quick video to show how it's made, how they're made, and I will just talk my way through it as we see it. Oh, it didn't go. How do we make it go? No? Right. Oh dear, I'm sorry, I can't get the video to move. Oh, let's try clicking down. No, the clicker's not working. So.
I'm trying to see if there's something I can do from my side, and I don't think there is.
Well, we'll run.
Right.
Aha, that was the trouble, was it? Yes, okay. Here we go. So making a bead. I'm sorry, I can't speed this up any faster. It's about 2 minutes. The glass rod is heated in the flame, and you've got a mandrel there that will form the hole in the bead. That's the center of the bead. And there is the glass being wound round. This does take quite a lot of practice. It's like honey on a spoon, and you've got to keep twisting. And so you melt it on, you build it up until the bead is as big as you wish, and then you will heat it in the flame, and the natural process of the glass, the natural physical quality of the glass, means that the bead will turn into a perfect sphere on its own. It doesn't need to be touched. So this is how you decorate the beads. And here I am coming in with some tongs. I'm going to make a cylinder bead. So if you want different shapes, you've got to tong it. And these tongs are wooden, and they don't burn too much if you dip them in water. This is pulling a stringer, a fine piece of spaghetti of glass, in order to make your decorations, to add your decorations to your bead. And here, using a stringer to decorate the bead. You've got to keep it in just the right part of the flame, or it simply doesn't work. It'll all melt and go to worms. The bead is plunged into vermiculite. Anglo-Saxons may well have used hot sand or ash. And then when they're cool, you soak the mandrel, and the clay will sort of soften away, a little bit of a twist, and there's the bead, and the mandrel has left a handy hole for you to thread your bead. And there we are. There's the finished results. So finally, necklaces and how they were worn is another part of my research. And you sometimes get some wonderful chart drawings and maps and plans of where the beads were actually found. Then you've got a chance of creating the necklaces as a result. And you can see they're very symmetrical. They love their symmetry just as much as we like it today, with heavier beads at the bottom to make it wearable and a joy to them all. A mixture, amber beads, glass beads. They mixed amber and glass together. The paintings are quite nice because they show exactly what they would have looked like. And here is an old necklace and what it looked like. It looks like today from Snape. And on the left, you can see my painting, but I have also made a replica necklace. This one is on display in Weststow Museum. And again, I hope it reaches out to people and grabs the public and makes them able to see. Another one here, and here we have a couple of ladies my paintings of what they would have liked. And the little girl on the right is the one that started it all those years ago. And if anyone is interested, my book is now out. It's pretty widely available, Amazon worldwide or from Blackwell's. Particularly Blackwell's will send it out within the week, so they're quite good. And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your research. Such a pleasure to listen to. I absolutely second the motion that just muddling through is one of the greatest research tools, especially using historically appropriate tools in techniques. You know, serendipity is a great research tool, but mucky fingers are even better. So thank you so much. A very, very different approach to understanding what making can be in terms of facilitating engagement with the past. Now, I have so many questions, but I cannot be the only one, and you're not here to listen to me. Should we open up the floor to questions? I'm happy to take questions online and in person. Before we start, I'd like to share a comment from Fiona saying next year, this is in response to Tamsin's talk, next year Dingwall, the county town of Ross in Cromarty, celebrates its 800th anniversary becoming a royal burgh. So it's just about the same time the Magna Carta was happening in England. And asking Tamsin about what breed of sheep. Would you be able, please, to tell us a bit about the sheep?
The sheep, they are Gotland sheep. We have 33 sheep at the moment. I don't really know what to say about them. They are the most characterful sheep. They love a cuddle. They come over. They're like dogs, really. But then they're a fantastic breed. If you're into sheep.
Fiona, does that answer your question? If not, please add a note in the chat and we'll come back to you in a second. I should say that this is the time we're scheduled to end the session. If you need to leave now, please do. We're not going to hold you hostage. But if you're available to stay for another 5 or 10 minutes, it would be wonderful to continue the discussion. Right, Fiona says, yes, thank you. So we know about the sheep. Wonderful. Are there any questions in the room? I'll have to ask for a bit of help to see who has any hands raised.
Yeah, I have a question to, is it Suhaila? Yeah. Suhaila, okay. Because you said quite a lot about sort of unmaking and disturbing histories. And I just wanted to ask you, how do you negotiate this relationship between being a maker and an unmaker?
That's a good question. I think, it was really interesting when Hannah was talking earlier and talking about how, that it was quite specific in terms of when they were thinking of structuring the residencies, they were thinking rather than artist, they were thinking about it as maker in residence. Because even though I am an artist, when people ask me, what is it that you do? My response has always been that I make, because I think, essentially what I'm making are counter-archival forms. And so for me, that kind of idea of being a maker of counter-archival forms, it requires sort of unmaking. It requires that sort of intervention of taking things apart and sort of uncovering, right? Because I think because that's a lot of the histories that I'm talking about or that I want to kind of surface are the ones that are underneath. And the only way I can sort of get to them is by sort of unmaking the ones that are in dominant, you know, that are dominant, that are in the landscape, that are the ones that we kind of understand to be real, if that makes sense. So I think unmaking is an essential part of being a maker and approaching, you know, approaching these kind of histories in a different way, to shed, kind of to bring in other voices and to bring in things that we may not sort of tend to otherwise. Sorry, I hope that answers something.
I think it does that answer your question. Unless I hear otherwise, I'll assume you. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're moving on to the next question.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up question to this before we do? Because there's a distinction between unmaking and destruction. And I wondered if we could tie into Tamsin's talk and her tasks of making carbon, for example, out of the bones of the sheep. How do you consider this in relation to the framework of unmaking? Do you consider this an act of destruction, or of unmaking, or of new making?
Is that a question for me or for Suhaila?
For you.
Okay.
So that we can all talk together. It's
I think
better for discussion.
I don't think of it as of destruction, though, I suppose, because the end result is becoming. I'm all, you know, it's a remaking, so or a to destruct is almost to ruin and discard, whereas this is a transformation and a remaking, which is what we do with nature and materials ongoingly. Is that a satisfactory answer?
If it's what you want to say, it's satisfactory to me. No, it's really fascinating to have such different perspectives involved. Thank you so much. What is our next audience question?
Thank you. It's Jane Vincent. My question is actually particularly to Sue, but possibly addressed to the others. It's about the assumptions we make as artists when we're kind of making, unmaking. And I wondered if Sue could say, can you tell us about the assumptions that you made about the glass colour and its composition when you were replicating the Anglo-Saxon work?
Well, with glass, it's not paint, it's oxides, metal oxides. And therefore you can analyze the ancient beads and find out what the oxides were inside them, what was used to color. Like iron would make, say, you can be used to make red, it will make blue too. If you add iron and lead, you get a very brilliant red, much brighter than the red we see hanging in museums now. And I did do a Roman glass experiment, the Museum of London. I persuaded them to let me have some of their Roman colored. So I could try coloring it with oxides, and I could also try making beads with it to make sure that the modern artisan glass I'm using is similar to what the ancient Anglo-Saxon bead makers were using. And the Roman glass is fabulous to make beads with. And it's much more flexible than the modern glass, because modern glass is made, well, for a start, we've had to leave all the lead out because it poisons us. But the Anglo-Saxons weren't worried about these niceties. So as a result, the ancient glass is beautifully easy to use and will accept a lot more fluctuation in your temperature. So to my huge relief, after doing several years of testing, making replicas, I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, if the Roman glass behaves very much differently, then I'm not getting anywhere at all. But to my great relief, and thank you, Mola, it proved that it's very like our modern glass and better. Does that answer that all right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is another one for Sue, actually. With the patterns in the glass, have you found any sort of images in or icons within those patterns?
Sadly, no. The Romans got up to that, and in Hellenistic times, they actually made millefiori, like the paperweights. And in fact, some of my experiments, I have been making millefiori, and gosh, is that hard. And they had little Medusas and little Greek masks. And they are absolutely fabulous. They make the millefiori that you see in paperweights look like sort of child's toys compared. So they do say that the Venetians, you see this often in the literature, the Venetians invented millefiori. No, no, no. It was, well, it might have been a few Venetians, but it was the Romans who came up with this, and they did it much better than anybody. Or a few modern glass bead makers in America, in particular today, are making fabulous standard. But the Romans really had it nailed. It was superb. But no, in the Anglo-Saxon work, and half of the beads in Britain are locally made, and I can recognize the hand of particular bead makers now as a result of my work. You can, because there's so many variables involved. It's a fascinating area. It's like people who are good at looking at old masters, they can detect the brushstrokes. And I can detect from tool marks and from the way the decoration's been put on. So there's loads of stories to pull out and link up. But actual motifs, no. That was the prerogative of the Romans.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest, Elizabeth, that we wrap up on that point. I know that there will be lots more questions, but I'd just like to invite you to make any final comments on the papers that we've heard. Thank you.
Well, absolutely fascinating stuff. I'm very, very glad to think about the ways that research can engage with making and transformation and unmaking, and the role, as Sohaila has said, of being seen and refusing that gaze of the performativity of this kind of engagement with research. Thank you, all three of you. Thank you to Anouska. It's been a wonderful event. I hope that you do follow in the tradition of founders of the Society of Antiquaries and continue talking about old things with a glass of something to drink in your hand during the reception. On that note, I will disappear, and thank you again.
I'm just going to briefly say thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to Elizabeth for navigating hybrid chairing, which I don't think is regularly done, but we pulled it off. So in the room, we are now going to have a short tea break, just tea. There are biscuits, but if you would like coffee or another form of caffeine, I would recommend you go to one of the venues around the courtyard or on Piccadilly. And we will come back here for 4:45. For the people online, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really pleased that we were able to create something that more people were able to join, and that we have a lasting record of some really important work, very varied, so many different approaches. But I think there are lots of connections, which I hope we will continue talking about in the room and online and at future events. So thank you so much for joining us.